University and a PhD from the Union Institute and University. Dr. Zeisel is a distinguished fellow of AGPA. He has served as Vice Chair of the Group Foundation for Advancing Mental Health. He has served on the AGPA Board, the Annual Meeting Committee, as co-chair of the Open Sessions, and has been a member of what is now the International Board for Certification of Group Psychotherapists. He is a founder and faculty member of the Center for Group Studies in New York City. Dr. Zeisel is also a faculty member and training analyst at the Center for Modern Psychoanalytic Studies. He is a member of the Israeli Institute of Group Analysis, and he has lectured on various aspects of analytic group therapy, both nationally and abroad. Dr. Zeisel maintains a private practice for individual and group treatment in New York City, Austin, Texas, and Rochester, New York. I've known Elliot for over 20 years now, and one of the ways I know him is as an artist. He's an oil painter with a gift for capturing the light in a landscape, seascape, or still life. Through our shared experience when he has come to Atlanta to present and when attending the annual meeting at AGPA, I have witnessed Elliot develop as a teacher and a clinician. In my opinion, even though his canvas is different than when he paints with oil, his professional work is artistic, skilled, alive, and very present. I'm proud to know him and delighted to introduce him to you as our plenary speaker. The title of his talk is Undaunted Courage and the AGPA Institute. Elliot.
Thank you, Hank, for that generous introduction.
No, the mic. Mic.
Good morning.
Good morning.
When Hank called to invite me to open this year's Institute and reminded me that the meeting was to be held in San Francisco, my first association was to Lewis and Clark, the two Americans who in 1803, that's just 212 years ago, led a group on a journey that mapped and found a land route to the western United States. Now, up to that point in history, the West was known only to Native American nations, and little was understood about this part of the country by European settlers. That got me thinking about the role of exploration in the history of human evolution. Land, sea, and space exploration has captivated the human imagination for eternity, and is usually always a group process. I started to wonder about the impact of this area of human experience on the development of a more recent form of exploration, that of interpersonal and intrapsychic exploration. Some time ago, I had read Undaunted Courage by the historian Stephen Ambrose, the account of Meriwether Lewis, William Clark, and Thomas Jefferson's collaboration that led to the greatest expedition ever taken in the history of this country. In considering their accomplishment, it seems to me that the success was attributed to a number of factors that included strong leadership abilities, group process, and the resolution of resistance, and ultimately cooperation, without which there would never have been success. This morning, I'm going to talk about some things I've learned about 19th and 20th century explorers and the process that helped them succeed in their expeditions. My reading of it is that success of these expeditions hinged on the character of the group's leader and the interpersonal process that developed member to leader and member to member. I believe these stories of discovery holds some important lessons for us as group clinicians and for the work that awaits you in the Institute ahead. In 1803, the known population of the United States was 5,300,000 people who lived between the Atlantic coast and the Mississippi River. Most lived close to the eastern edge of the country. It was assumed that it would always be this way. The idea of progress was utterly alien to most Americans. However, Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, was a dreamer, an innovator, and a visionary, among other things. In 1803, Jefferson orchestrated the Louisiana Purchase from France for the sum of $15 million. The Louisiana Territory encompassed all or part of 15 present states, 2 Canadian provinces, and once achieved, the purchase ensured the free passage on the Mississippi River. For several years prior to the purchase, Jefferson planned an expedition that was to combine scientific, commercial, and agricultural interest with geographic discovery and nation building. There was knowledge of the West Coast, but no information about what existed between the edge of the Mississippi and the rest of the country, approximately 2,000 miles. In 1801, Jefferson invited Meriwether Lewis to become his personal secretary. Lewis came to live with Jefferson and his family in the White House and moved into what later became known as the East Room. He took his meals with the president and was always present when he entertained, which could be as often as 5 nights a week. Lewis was exposed to a rich stew of conversation and participated in lively debate on a variety of topics from science and literature to social and political issues. In planning the expedition west, Jefferson delineated the qualities required of a leader. He said about Meriwether Lewis, quote, "Of courage undaunted, possessing a fitness and perseverance of purpose, which nothing but impossibilities could divert from its direction. Careful as a father of those committed to his charge, yet steady in the maintenance of order and discipline. Intimate with the Indian character, custom and principle. Habituated to the hunting life, guarded by exact observation of the vegetables, animals of his own country, against losing time in the description of objects already possessed. Honest, disinterested, liberal, of sound understanding, and of fidelity to the truth, so scrupulous that whatever he should report would be certain as if seen by ourselves. With all these qualifications, as if selected and implanted by nature in one body, for the express purposes, I could have no hesitation in confiding the enterprise to him." Close quote. Now, it's also true that Meriwether Lewis brought a great deal to the endeavor, including a healthy mind, body, and strength of character. Lewis grew to be the leader he was, in great measure because of the mother he had. The governor of Georgia, George Gilmer, Lewis's home state, said of Lewis's mother, quote, "She was sincere, truthful, industrious, and kind without limit," close quote. He added that Meriwether Lewis inherited the energy, courage, activity, and good understanding of his admirable mother. Jefferson was 58 and a widower, and Lewis was 27 when they began their project. Lewis had lost his father in childhood. Jefferson, an ideal transference figure and surrogate father, was described as versatile and inexhaustible, and in taking Lewis under his wing, he became his mentor and educator. The president devoted himself to preparing Lewis for the journey west, and over the course of 2 years, Jefferson exposed Lewis to instruments of navigation, geography, bird, animal, and plant life, philosophy, medicine, literature, and history. In therapeutic terms, I think it's safe to say that Jefferson met many of the maturational needs of his young colleague. I believe the ultimate success of Lewis's exploration lies in part in his wish to maintain the emotional connection to Jefferson. And to highlight the theme of this year's meeting, Jefferson was a secure base for Lewis. So here's the first lesson we learned from this expedition. The leader of your institute group has got to be prepared for the job. I've been attending or leading institutes for over 30 years, and I can tell you with certainty that the leaders of this year's group are the best in the country. Like Meriwether Lewis, they've invested in their development and honed skills that will serve you in this process. As Hank explained, their work here at the conference has already begun. Last night, they met with what we call their table. It's a group comprised of fellow Institute group leaders and 2 members of the Institute committee. In the course of the next 2 days, they'll be meeting periodically to assist each other and to ensure that you have a safe environment for your work to unfold. All of our Institute group leaders have the support and backing of an extraordinarily thorough and thoughtful Institute Conference Committee. Meriwether Lewis chose William Clark as his co-leader, and one of the first tasks was to form their group. Lewis wrote, quote, "A judicious choice of our party is of greatest importance to the success of this vast enterprise," close quote. The selection of group members was paramount, and they were highly selective in this process. They told prospective members they would journey to uncharted territory for an unknown duration. Sounds like group treatment, doesn't it? If they were lucky enough to return, the members of the party, that's Lewis's party, would be rewarded with land grants. They departed on their journey with a group of 33 people. Since the process was open-ended, membership was open-ended. Well into their journey, which lasted 2 years and 4 months, the group came across a Native American woman, Sacagawea, and her French husband, a trapper. She was pregnant and was hired as an interpreter of the Shoshone language. Sacagawea gave birth on the journey, and although the captains didn't plan it, she was a sign of peaceful intentions to the Indian nations, since a woman and a child didn't accompany war parties. She played an essential role in establishing diplomatic relations by translating and facilitating talk between the explorers and Native American chiefs that they encountered. The group included one Afro-American, York, a slave who was a childhood companion to Clark. He was a full member of the team and made valuable contributions to the success of their effort. For a brief period, York was a free man, whose vote was counted whenever the group was polled on key decisions. The same was true for Sacagawea. Her vote was counted. So this may be the first time in recorded American history when a woman and a black man were recognized and voted as equals with their white compatriots. Lesson 2. Institute groups are time-limited and closed. Once the process starts, only those on roster participants will be admitted. Hopefully, this will be a diverse group of people. Whatever the composition, you may find aspects of your father's, mother's, brothers, sisters, bosses, co-workers' character in the personality of other Institute participants. Lewis and Clark knew that there would be barriers to communicating with people along the way. With that in mind, they employed Sacagawea to bridge the gap and foster communication in some highly charged emotional situations. There will be tension in your Institute group, but rest assured, the group, with the help of the leader, will make use of the exchange. This is a unique opportunity for you to engage in experiential and cognitive learning. In their journey, Lewis and Clark established relations and trade with 24 Native American nations. These nations, in turn, were crucial in helping the Corps avoid starvation during harsh winters and assisted them in navigating through the Rocky Mountains. In my many years attending Institute groups, I've witnessed people navigate through rocky moments and have seen lasting friendships emerge. Lewis and Clark named their expeditionary group the Corps of Discovery. In my research, I discovered that most missions of this sort name the group. For example, NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, has named each group of astronauts since the beginning of its missions in 1959. This is a typical class of astronauts. Here are some of the names of the groups that have flown to outer space.
Maggots. 35 new guys.
Now, there's nothing on the NASA website to explain how the groups are named. I gather that the nicknames have something to do with some essential quality in the group. I can imagine, for example, that the group in 2013, the 8 Balls, either refers to a group of 4 men or a group comprised of people who like working under pressure. I'm not suggesting that you name your institute group, but I am thinking that paying attention to the large themes in the process of your group is a helpful exercise and may yield some valuable information. In NASA space flights, there have been astronauts from 14 different countries. How many of you here today are from outside the United States? Show of hands.
Oh, wow.
Wonderful. In the process of preparing this talk, I had a lot of help, by the way. A lot of help from my groups, from colleagues who helped me with everything from computer issues to part of the subject. And one of them was Leon Hoffman from Chicago, who pointed me in the direction of Ernest Shackleton. Shackleton organized an expedition some 110 years after Lewis and Clark. He was an English explorer and named his ship Endurance, based on his family's name, his family's motto, "By endurance we conquer." His mission, which began on the eve of World War I in 1914, was to cross Antarctica using sleds and dogs. 5,000 men and sailors, from Cambridge-educated scientists to sailors, rather, applied for membership in this group, including 3 women. There was room for 27 people. The ad that they used to recruit people said, "Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success." Now imagine using those words in recruiting members for our groups. There's no record of any interview that Shackleton conducted with a prospective group member that lasted much more than 5 minutes. His intuitive decision-making in selecting members seemed to prove accurate most of the time. However, his intuitive sense failed him when it came to the weather. This is a picture of the Endurance sailing. And 100 miles from the coast of Antarctica, the Endurance became locked in gathering packs of ice. They were one day sail away from their destination. The crew lived aboard this ship for 10 months. The wind howled. The temperatures were often minus 20 to minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. That's minus 32 degrees Celsius. It was remarkable that there was a limited amount of friction among the men, especially after the Arctic night set in. The gathering darkness and unpredictable weather limited their activities to an ever-constricted area around the ship. There was very little to occupy them, and they were in closer contact with one another than ever. But instead of getting on each other's nerves, the entire party seemed to become more close-knit. Shackleton encouraged activities and proved to be a therapeutic genius. He was an activities therapist. The men engaged in music making. Shackleton referred to the one banjo player as vital mental medicine, excuse me. There was organized singing, phonograph concerts, dramatic plays, humorous skits, dog sled racing, soccer matches when the weather permitted, and lectures on various subjects that the scientists were to study. They all shaved their heads and posed for pictures. Shackleton understood that the ice was not the main problem. It was the morale of his men. It was the mental, emotional challenge that he had to contend with. He kept his men on a strict daily routine and monitored their morale. He possessed an ability to attend to individuals and their needs, while addressing the needs of the larger group. He was a gifted person in promoting a secure base so that attachment could be formed and maintained. He participated in the physical challenges that he and his men faced daily. Like a skilled group therapist, he was engaged in an ongoing sweep of awareness and continuously took the emotional temperature of his men and the group as a whole. He fostered a team mentality by having everyone work as equals. Shackleton ignored the rigid class system of his day and had professors scrubbing the floors alongside of sailors. They ate together at a common table. Everyone got the same portion of food, and on one occasion, Shackleton chided the cook for giving him a larger portion than his men. He also communicated to his group that they were more important than the goal of the expedition. People mattered, not the end goal. When there was interpersonal tension, he acted decisively. As therapists, we're encouraged to go towards what's difficult and challenging, and Shackleton did the same. Shackleton's training as a leader was helped immeasurably by a voyage with the famous explorer, British explorer, Scott, aboard whose ship he had served as a young man. It was there that he observed Scott's poor leadership style as men of different classes and personalities, thrown together in close quarters, fought and failed to cooperate as morale eroded. Here's evidence that you can turn a difficult group experience into valuable learning. As a leader, Shackleton did not rage or show outwardly the slightest signs of disappointment. Optimism was at the core of his personality. One of his men wrote about Shackleton in his diary and said, quote, "Whatever his mood, whether it was gay and breezy, dark with rage, he had one pervading characteristic. He was purposeful," close quote. He was a man who believed completely in his own invincibility and for whom defeat was a reflection of personal inadequacy. He strove to imbue his crew with a basic faith in themselves, that they could pit their strength and determination against any obstacle and somehow overcome it. After 10 months trapped in the ice, moderating temperatures and the ensuing breakup of the ice created thousands of tons of pressure on the hull of the Endurance and crushed her. At the time, Shackleton said, quote, "What the ice gets, the ice keeps." Over a period of days, they made plans to abandon ship. The temperature the day they left the ship, the temperature was minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 26 degrees Celsius. Dr. Alexander Macklin, the ship's doctor, said, quote, "It was at this moment that Shackleton showed one of his sparks of real greatness. He did not show the slightest signs of disappointment. He told us simply and calmly that we would have to spend the winter on the ice." Like a skilled group leader, Shackleton contained his anxiety and announced in a convoy's, quote, "Ship and stores are gone, so now we'll go home," close quote. Shackleton and his crew lived on the ice for 5 more months, with meager food, clothing, and shelter. While the crew was suffering with considerable deprivation, they often rose to Shackleton's example and showed remarkable compassion for each other. When First Officer Lionel Greenstreet spilled his ration of powdered milk on the ice, he seemed despondent over the loss. And one by one, the 7 men who shared his tent silently poured some of their precious milk into his cup, refilling it. Eventually, the ice relented and created a lead to open water. They rowed for 7 days in 3 open lifeboats to Elephant Island, a desolate, uninhabited pile of rock. Once there, it became clear that to save his crew, Shackleton would have to travel an additional 800 miles across a dangerous ocean to South Georgia Island, where there was a whaling station. The Weddell Sea is described as the most treacherous and dismal region on the Earth's surface. The crew used sealskins to create a protected area in the open lifeboat that they would row and sail the distance. Shackleton took 5 men and left 22 men behind. He and his small crew took water and food for 4 weeks, beyond which they knew they couldn't survive. It was to be an extraordinary journey of survival. Along the way, 2 men were close to death, and Shackleton kept a close eye on each one, calling for hot drinks whenever he saw one who was failing. Everyone was served. He never called attention to a member who was weakened. No one was singled out to hold the disowned, hopeless parts of the team. And instead, whatever negativity there was equally distributed among the group. Using a sextant, they had to chart their course based on the sun's position to the horizon. But the sun rarely appeared and the waves were too immense. The navigator was able to take only 4 readings, and the rest was done by dead reckoning. After 17 days, they reached land, but couldn't find a safe way to come ashore. With land in sight, they were struck by a hurricane that lasted 9 hours. When they finally landed, they realized they'd have to cross the island since the boat was no longer seaworthy. The 26-mile or 42-kilometer interior of South Georgia Island had never been crossed, and there were glaciers, mountains, and valleys that separated them from the station. Most people would have given up and felt demoralized at this point, but Shackleton pressed on in a matter-of-fact way, radiating a conviction that they would succeed. 3 of the men were not fit to make the journey. When Shackleton left at night with 2 others to cross the island, their feet were frostbitten. He and his men had clothes that were in tatters, no food, no water. They took 50 feet of rope and a carpenter's adze to use as an ice pick. They ran into several dead ends before finding a route that took them to the top of a glacier. Caught high up without shelter or sleeping bags, they pushed on and slid down a mountain of snow and ice to avoid the chilly night temperatures that would have surely killed them. At the bottom of the slide, the 3 fell into a deep sleep. Shackleton roused himself almost immediately for fear of succumbing to hypothermia and certain death. He allowed his 2 compatriots 5 minutes of sleep, woke them up, told them they had slept for a half hour, They marched on for a total of 36 hours and finally arrived at the whaling station. Their efforts led to the rescue of all 27 men. To this day, no one has succeeded, even with modern-day equipment and supplies, to equal this feat in the same amount of time. In the history of exploration, Shackleton's failed expedition is seen as a monumental achievement in human endurance, leadership skills, and group process. Lesson 3, embrace resistance. Get curious about its meaning. Think of resistance as the royal road to understanding, rather than thinking of it as something to shed. In your work, in our work, we look at resistance as a map that helps us understand the choices people make in order to survive. It's clear that Shackleton was in possession of an enormous capacity for holding what was agitating and unpleasant in the extreme. He was tolerant of process, no matter how difficult it was. And he was focused on a successful outcome. You know, resistance is usually either process resistance or outcome resistance. And clearly in this story of Shackleton, there was a lot of both. My own sense of adventure and love of nature was nurtured by my father, who loved to hike. He was born in Europe and never adopted American sports. He also collected National Geographic magazines so that every month there was news of discovery in the natural world that was part of our conversation. In 1973, early in the journey of my own career, I completed an MSW. After graduation, I flew to Los Angeles and hitchhiked up Highway 1. It was a time when we lived in the afterglow of Woodstock, and you can do that sort of thing in relative safety. That's the crew. That's me. I spent a week at Esalen and went on to Yosemite to hike and camp solo in high country. I was learning to be more self-reliant and separate from my family. It was June, and there was snow on the ground, and there were bears to contend with. I ended my trip in San Francisco. One of the anthems of the day was Scott McKenzie's, "If you're going to San Francisco, be sure to wear some flowers in your hair. If you're going to San Francisco, you're going to meet some gentle people there." If that was the anthem, the rallying cry was Timothy Leary's, "Turn on, tune in, and drop out." Today, as you begin your 2-day expedition, I'd encourage you to be bold, be known, choose connection.